Sanje chedang so chi chu nam la chan chu ba do dani cha su chi da gi jin zo ji pe se nam ru la pen chi san ji ru ba ju Sanje chedang so chi chu nam la chan chu ba do dani cha su chi Dagi jinzo je pe nam je Drula penche sanje drubaj Sanje chedan sochi chonam la Janchu padu dani chapsuj Dagi jinzo je pe nam je Drula penche sanje drubaj Vaden sawe lama rinpoche, dagi chiwo peme den shula, kadin chimbo gane jezonde, kusundu jinadu sadhu so. So firstly, good morning to everybody. We're going to continue from where we left off yesterday in this explanation of the 7 points of mind training. As you remember, we've begun the second point, the main training, the main practice in the 2 types of bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta and conventional or relative bodhicitta. We already completed the instructions for ultimate bodhicitta, and we began to study the instructions for conventional or relative bodhicitta. And the core instruction, the principal instruction for that is the meditation of sending and taking, which is the way we carry out the exchange of oneself for others by meditating that we accept the sufferings experienced by all beings and the causes that create such suffering, the negative actions, we take it upon ourselves, and in exchange, so to speak, we send to them, we give to them all our present happiness and the causes of future happiness in the sense of all our virtuous actions. So we went through that according to Kamatin Rinpoche's commentary, and Rinpoche has explained how we link this, as the root text tells us to do, we link this exchange, this send and taking, with the flow of the breath. On the out breath we send the virtue and happiness, and on the in breath we absorb the sufferings and negative actions of others. So he's explained that, in particular talking about the taking of the negativities from others. And then Rinpoche adds a special instruction to this, or a special way of doing the taking of sufferings. He says, if one meditates upon oneself as a yidam, such as Chenrezig, then what you can do to make this taking practice effective is visualize that the black air, or the pollution which embodies the sufferings that others are experiencing and their negative actions, it is absorbed into the clear appearance of the deity. So you are meditating yourself as Chenrezi, with the pride of being Chenrezi and with the clarity of the appearance of your body as that of Chenrezi. So if you're doing that, then take the sufferings of others in the form of the black smoke and absorb it into your body, that is to say Chenrezi's body. And when the black air is absorbed into the clear appearance of the deity, Chenrezi then shines with a brilliant white light, like sunlight striking the side of a snow mountain. In other words, the black pollution which embodies all the sufferings of others doesn't diminish the Chenrezi's appearance, which is of course brilliant white in color, but even strengthens it. It strengthens it. It increases his whiteness. And in this way, Rinpoche says, generate immeasurable compassion, compassion without any limit or any boundaries, and think that the misdeeds, the negative actions of all sentient beings, of the 6 classes, meaning the 6 realms, from the hells, ghosts, animals, humans, asuras, and God realms, are purified, because you're taking them into yourself as Chenrezig. And that each of those beings populating the 6 realms becomes free from whatever sufferings they have. So this is a special method one can apply, if one wishes, to enhance the practice of taking. Then Rinpoche continues. Next, as one breathes out through one's nostrils and pores, white light goes out to the realms, the 6 realms, and the physical forms of each being of the 6 classes, and is absorbed into them. So actually here one can do this even whether or not one is in the form of Chenrezig, meaning if you're not using the Chenrezig visualization at this time, then just as you breathe in the black air through your nostrils and down into your heart, now as you breathe out, you imagine that all your virtue and all your happiness is emitted in the form of white rays, usually described as like moon rays. And that goes out and touches all the sentient beings and purifies them of their suffering and their negative actions. Of course, there's one point here, it says physical forms of each being. Now one might have a question, because of course it is true that we humans and also beings in the animal realms do have at least what appears to be a physical form. Of course, ultimately everything is the appearance of mind. But nevertheless, relatively speaking, humans and animals have a kind of organic form, whereas beings in the God realms, the Asura realms, and the hell realms and ghost realms, their bodies are what we call mind-made. They're no more substantial than the body which we imagine we have in a dream. Nevertheless, here the point is, they're still in all these realms. For the beings themselves, they still have the imagination that they have a form, they have a kind of shape, a kind of location. So therefore it's not contradictory to say that the light rays purify their forms. So if one is doing it as Chenrezig, then it will be the light rays coming from your nostrils, but also from every pores of your appearance as Chenrezig. Through this radiation, this sending of the virtue and happiness to others, all of one's virtue and happiness becomes a vast and inexhaustible treasury of space, and each being obtains whatever they need. It means a treasury of space is like something, it's like the ability to draw from space any properties that are needed for others. And so what you're bestowing gives others everything they need in terms of happiness and in terms of virtue. Everything without limit. So it's like said to be a treasury of space. Think that now free of suffering, these beings enjoy happiness and well-being in body and mind until they reach the state of Buddhahood. So you want them to have happiness now and virtue now, and of course ultimately you want them to have Buddhahood, the ultimate bliss. So both temporal bliss and good conditions and the ultimate bliss of Buddhahood. This is what you are meditating occurs for beings through your radiation of lights. In this way, generate limitless loving kindness towards all beings. Then Rinpoche says, so this description of send and taking is the actual practice for regular meditation sessions. So when you're meditating conventional bodhicitta, this is how you apply it in the session of meditation. But the same attitude of giving everything to others and giving everything positive to others and taking everything negative onto yourself from them should be applied in the post-meditative state. So it's like you don't cease the intention of sending and taking just when you finish the meditation. You bring it into everyday life, where of course there'll be endless opportunities to practice sending and taking, because one is continually encountering people with people with difficulties. Rinpoche says, it is said that sending and taking is practiced, as this particular meditation of Tonglen is practiced, connected with the breath, because it is easy to focus the mind. It ensures that the training is swift, that it really, bodhicitta is engendered very rapidly in you through this practice. And it subdues numerous concepts, as we said yesterday. By linking the meditation of sending and taking to the breath, it is already, in a way, taking it from the intellect, from the head, so to speak, into the kind of the heart. So it's not going to be just a kind of trivial, intellectual, conceptual play. It's going to be deeper than that, because it's linked with the natural flow of the breath. Again, to describe its qualities, Rinpoche says, this practice of Tonglen is also the essence of the four immeasurables, or the four limitlesses. In this sense, to practice sending is to practice limitless loving kindness, because you're wishing, may they have happiness. I'm sending them my happiness, and the cause of happiness. Taking is immeasurable or limitless compassion, because now you're thinking, they have suffering, and in response to that suffering, I absorb it into myself and those causes of suffering. So that is the practice of limitless compassion. To visualize the dispelling of all beings' sufferings and their establishment in happiness is the third limitless, immeasurable joy, which is, of course, to rejoice that others have achieved the happiness which is free from suffering. And to practice this, to meditate this with impartiality towards friends and enemies alike, is immeasurable equanimity, or limitless equanimity, the fourth limitless. In other words, when you're doing this sending and taking, you don't just do it for your friends, or those near to you, those related to you. You do it equally to even those who appear to be your enemy at this present time. So it is absolutely all-embracing, absolutely without division or restriction. So just this practice of Tonglen includes each of the four limitlesses. Now, Rinpoche at this point wants to, in a way, answer potential questions that people might have, which could cause them to hesitate about doing the practice. You may ask, well, would anybody have hesitation? Actually, yes. In fact, historically it seems that in Tibet, when this practice was taught, there were some people who were kind of had a doubting reaction to it, that it should be practiced. And nowadays also there might be some hesitations or uncertainties about the practice. So Rinpoche is going to answer them here. So the question is, the putative question is, might not the taking of suffering of others bring harm to me? That question might occur to one, just as it has occurred to other people. So, in fact, this can be answered, this question, can be answered in four points, as you'll see. So, firstly, one way Rinpoche's answers. So, firstly, one way to answer this question is by considering those masters such as Geshe Chekwa himself, Geshe Chekwa Yeshidoji, the one who composed the 7 points of instruction for Lodjong. He mastered the exceptional bodhicitta of the exchange of self and others. And in him, as well as other masters we can think of, self-clinging has become completely exhausted. Actually, Geshe Chekwa in another text tells a story that on one time he was invited to a monastery where one of his friends was staying, but when he got there, he was treated very, very badly by his friend, the person he thought was his friend, and by the monks of that monastery, really badly. But he said, but solely through my reliance on the practice of sending and taking, I was able to transform all these difficulties into the path to enlightenment. And again, it is said, for instance, Shaman Rinpoche, Kunchuk Yunlat said that Geshe Chekwa achieved the first noble bodhisattva bhumi through this practice. So we can consider the example of the great holders of this teaching, the early Kadampa Geshes, as a kind of answer to this. That it does not bring suffering to oneself. In fact, the very opposite, because through this we exhaust all self-clinging, and therefore we should. Just as they enter this practice with great enthusiasm and great joy, so should we. And at this point, Rinpoche quotes this famous line from Shantideva. They, meaning they, bodhisattvas, they will even enter the Avicii hell, the interminable hell, the lowest of the 8 hot hells. They will even enter the Avicii hell like geese plunging into a lotus lake. It means that if one generates bodhicitta, like a authentic bodhisattva, one will not be afraid of any difficulties. Instead, one will rejoice in entering even into the most difficult situations. As Rinpoche says, they have accepted others' suffering and wish to experience that suffering, and having perfected the special practice of send and taking, would gladly experience all of this suffering in a single moment for the sake of their happiness, meaning the happiness of others. And of course, in this point, in discussing this particular answer, one should remember the example of Shakyamuni Buddha himself. His very journey to Buddhahood, I think I already mentioned this story, began when, having been reborn in hell through to his negative actions, his violent actions, the future Buddha then, seeing other beings born in hell being afflicted with great suffering, told the guards guarding the beings, give the suffering to me. I will take that suffering from that person onto myself. And when this exchange of self and others happened, but in just that moment, then the future Buddha was immediately liberated from hell and began his journey to Buddhahood. But it's because of his fearless attitude that occurred. So, like it says, you would gladly experience all of this suffering in a single moment for the sake of their happiness. Now, that leads to the second point. However, in terms of experiencing the sufferings of others that you're taking onto yourself, that you're willing to take onto yourself, actually it may be understood, Rinpoche says, through scripture, as to what Lord Buddha's taught in the sutras, that the ripening of a negative action performed by any being of the 6 realms can only be experienced in the aggregates of the one who does that action. The result cannot, in fact, be transferred to to another. So that's like it said in the sutras, like, where do the effects of karma ripen? They do not ripen in the water or in stone. They ripen solely in the aggregates of the one who has done the deed. So aggregates meaning the five constituents, the form, feeling, perception, formations and consciousness, which conditioned phenomena make up that which we cling to as a self. We cling to in error as a self. So the skandhas are rising and passing away from moment to moment, from life to life, and it is in the continuum of the aggregates of the one who does it that an action will ripen. It cannot be transferred to anything external or to another person. So that is actually how it is. And of course His Holiness talked about this a couple of days ago. So, no, it is not true that the suffering can be experienced by anyone other than the one who does the deed. And then point 3, Rinpoche says, furthermore, when the previous Buddhas practiced sending and taking, they never experienced the sins, obscurations or sufferings of other beings within their own bodies, like the example I used of the Bodhisattva at the beginning of his spiritual career, when he was willing to take on the torture that another being was having in hell. In fact, he was liberated from that hell situation and reborn in the higher realms immediately. So he didn't actually experience the ripening of that suffering on himself. Yet, by their willingness to do this practice, Rinpoche says, through the heart of compassion engendered by the practice, they travel the 5 paths, from the path of accumulation to the path of no more learning, and the 10 bhumis, the 10 noble bodhisattva bhumis, from the joyful bhumi to the cloud of Dharma, and through that they attained ultimate enlightenment, all through engendering compassion through this practice of taking this, exchanging self and others. So it is said that we too, through the skillful means of great compassion, if we imitate this example of the bodhisattvas and Buddhas, can attain to this state. We will come to traverse the 5 paths, the 10 noble levels, and achieve Buddhahood. And the essence of engendering compassion in the bodhisattva career is the meditation of sending and taking. Now, a kind of answer to this question in a way from the point of view of reasoning. We've had, Rinpoche has mentioned, the scriptural citations, scriptural sources for this. Now, how do we understand this through reasoning, that it is in fact entirely proper, entirely correct to practice send and taking, and we will not experience the ripening of another's suffering on one's own continuum. So Rinpoche makes a long quotation from Sakya Pandita, the great embodiment of Manjushri, one of the 5 founding fathers of the Sakya tradition. In Sakya Pandita's great work, Tomsam Rabye, discriminating the 3 vows, which is a small advertisement, I should say. I'm currently teaching in London and Germany. Anyway, advertisement time over. Rinpoche quotes from Sakya Pandita to answer this question. Some say, this is Sapan, some say that the bodhicitta of exchange is not a suitable object of meditation. So some masters were saying that in Tibet in the 12th and 13th centuries. Well, think of it this way. Examine whether the bodhicitta of exchanging self and other is virtuous or non-virtuous. If it is virtuous, and of course it is, if it is virtuous, this is inconsistent with it giving rise to suffering. If it were non-virtuous, the action of exchanging must arise from the three poisons. But this exchange cannot come from the three poisons. Three poisons meaning hatred, desire, and ignorance. Because as Nagarjuna has said in the Jewel Garland, to define non-virtue, non-virtuous acts are those which arise from the three poisonous intentions: desire, hatred, and ignorance. But of course, practicing sending taking does not arise from those motivations, so it cannot be non-virtuous. This being so, because it is not non-virtuous, how can suffering arise? This takes us back to the fundamental teaching of the Four Noble Truths, the very first Dhamma teaching given by Lord Buddha. And there it is said, the noble truth, first noble truth is there is suffering. And second noble truth is what is its origination, its cause, is self-clinging. Self-clinging and the following non-virtues are the cause of suffering. So only suffering's only source is non-virtuous intention. It cannot, just like rice can only come from a rice seed and not from a barley seed, so suffering can only come from non-virtuous actions and intentions. So it is obvious that therefore practicing exchanges self for another, which is an entirely virtuous intention, one is renouncing self-clinging in opening oneself to the sufferings of others, one is stepping outside of selfishness, one is becoming free from any attachment to self in that very moment of practicing exchange. It cannot cause suffering. So there is nothing in the practice of exchanging and taking the sufferings of others which can cause suffering. It's like it's established through correct reasoning. And Sapan continues, furthermore, not all prayers of the mind training practice of bodhisattvas are unlimited in their effects. If they had such force, Maitrayanica's head, that is the name of the Buddha when he was that bodhisattva to be, born in hell, would be in agony forever. But of course it wasn't. He didn't actually experience the physical transfer of the suffering of the person who he wanted to free from suffering. Even the Buddhas of the three times, the Buddhas of the past, the present, and the future, because they practiced the exchange of self and others, would experience continual suffering. And all those beings they exchange with would endure no samsaric suffering. Well, in that case, you see, the very first time a Buddha practiced exchanging suffering, exchanging self and other, and took the sufferings of others, all the suffering in samsara would have dried up. Because the Buddha, of course, sincerely practices exchanging self and other, sending and taking, but it is a practice. It doesn't actually happen in that way. So he himself the Buddha would always have experienced suffering because he would take it on from others, and they would never have experienced suffering. But that has not actually occurred, as one can see. Now the present-day Buddhas, they're practicing this, but still beings experience suffering, and the Buddhas themselves do not experience suffering. Future Buddhas will practice it. Future beings will not be freed from suffering merely by that, and the future Buddhas will not experience that suffering. So words such as these, like those people criticizing the send and taking, saying, you shouldn't practice this because you'll experience suffering yourself, words such as this should be known as the counsel or the advice of Mara. It is like a deliberate attempt to confuse people and to distract people from practicing the authentic bodhisattva path. As he concludes, the exchange of self and other, and therefore Tonglen, is said to be the heart of the Buddha's teaching. So Rinpoche concludes this quote from Sakipandita saying, Therefore, since this practice of Tonglen is in accordance with the words of Lama Manjugosha, Manjugosha is another name for Manjushri, and Lama Manjushri is none other than Sakyapandita, you should practice this with joy. So in this way, the response has been made to those who might be nervous or hesitant to practice sending and taking. To sum up, both from scriptures, the examples of the past, and from reasoning, we can see that there is nothing to fear about practicing send and taking. Quite the reverse. One should joyfully practice send and taking because it's the key way to achieving Buddhahood for the benefit of others. Because again, one might say, well then why practice? If it doesn't immediately take the sufferings of others, why practice it? And the answer is, because you train in the Bodhisattva, heart of the Bodhisattva path, bodhicitta. Your bodhicitta gets stronger and stronger, vaster and vaster, the more you practice send and taking. And that will then culminate in your achieving Buddhahood, when you'll be equipped with unhindered power, all-embracing compassion, and undiminished wisdom, through which three qualities or three powers you can effectively help beings to discover the path to enlightenment, just as you vowed you would when you made the Bodhisattva vow. So practicing send and taking is extremely effective as the means of achieving Buddhahood. But it is not, you should not be confused and think you will presently experience the suffering in yourself that you're willing to take from others. Then Rinpoche wants to just say a little bit more about the practice. During the main practice in formal sessions mean like, sitting practice, because of course he's already indicated that you should try to continue the attitude of send and taking in everyday life. During the main practice in formal sessions, endeavor in the absorptions of shamatha and vipassana, and make a special effort in send and taking. So he's talking now about both bodhicitta meditations. The ultimate bodhicitta meditation leads you to the qualities of calm abiding, shamatha, and vipassana, direct insight. And your conventional bodhicitta is, of course, to make a special effort in send and taking. Now, if you practice, Rinpoche wants to add another special instruction, if you practice Tanton Jalpo's meditation and recitation of Chenrezig, which we all call the benefit of beings that pervade space, which we're doing every day, of course, here, and which I think everybody practices at home and in the various centers. If you're practicing that, you can unite the recitation of the 6 syllables with the visualization of sending and taking, so that when you're reciting the 6 syllables, you can use this as a method of taking the suffering of others and sending the happiness and virtue to others. So synchronize it, just as normally we would synchronize the send and taking with the inflow and outflow of the breath. In the Tanton Jalpa meditation, if we wish, we can synchronize the mantra recitation with the send and taking. Of course, the different visualizations one can apply during the recitation of the mantra in Chenrezig practice, in accord with the original instructions of Tanton Jalpo and Jamgon Control and the 15th Kamapa and so on. But here, for those who want to combine Lodjong with Chenrezig practice, is a very effective way to do it in terms of sending and taking united with the 6-syllable mantra. At the end of your session, Rinpoche says, the end of your session of practice, conclude with short or extensive mind training aspiration prayers as appropriate, and seal. They're actually, Rinpoche has not printed them out here, but in the Damnak Zur, the Treasury of Spiritual Instructions, Kontra Rinpoche has appended some mind training aspiration prayers. So you can find them there. And seal the session with prayers and dedications, such as the aspiration prayer of good conduct. In fact, if one practiced that, the King of Aspiration prayers, this would be a wonderful mind training aspiration in itself. Or even if one just recited a few verses from it, that would be a wonderful dedication, aspiration prayer. So this completes the section concerning the practice of mind training in informal sessions. And next, there will be instruction in the subsequent stage, just as we were given instructions in how to extend ultimate bodhicitta into everyday life by training in seeing everything as illusory. So the principle of taking the sufferings of others onto oneself, now one will be given instructions for how one can practice that in everyday life, in the subsequent stage. I think yesterday one or two people wanted to ask questions. I'm pretty sure His Holiness answered all conceivable questions yesterday, but if there's some small technical question you still have concerning the Lodjong, then we could clear it up now before carrying on with the text.
Please come up here, please.
Is this a game show, Danny?
What do I win? Right here. Thank you, Lama Jampa Thaye, for your teachings. Just on this morning, and you mentioned about Mara and how to. Maybe I'll skip that bit, but
Mara is very interesting.
yeah. No, my question is these teachings were given a long time ago.
Yeah.
Where concepts about the world were really just concepts, because there was no, rather than so you only had knowledge of your maybe local environment.
Yes.
In contemporary society, with social media and all this bombardment of suffering from everywhere that we can tap into, I could see a danger of someone practicing this, and maybe someone who's already in a mildly neurotic state, practicing this and going into deeper and deeper neurotic states, going out into the world to try and find suffering that they can take upon themselves.
Actually, Rinpoche will talk later about that, about don't go out and look for suffering. He will actually, he's brought that up himself in the commentary, that that's not what you should do. But on your point, so that's one point that's very important. But on the general point, first of all, I'd say that one should only practice Lodjong, or any Dhamma, in fact, if possible, only in consultation with one's personal Lama. Because he should be able to see, or she should be able to see whether it will work for you, or whether it's the time now for you to practice. Because in a way, you see, Lodjong is, it was described as a secret practice of the Mahayana, meaning it's very powerful. So although one says it's not a tantric practice and therefore doesn't need initiations and shouldn't be treated with the same reserve as Vajrayana, in a way one should be very careful about it. So therefore my first advice is to discuss with your personal Lama whether this is now the time for you to practice it. Then also one might say, and I've heard Rinpoche himself take this to people, well, if you like, just start with sending the happiness. Just start with that practice. You'll gradually build up kind of joy and strength in yourself, which is a very important point. You see, one might say, how do you know somebody's practicing send and taking? And one answer might be, oh, they look very miserable. Then they've got it wrong. Kamachame says, bodhicitta is eternal bliss. So in fact, the mind training should make you very joyful, very happy. If it's not doing that, it's not really working. So, therefore, at the very least, if one is oversensitive, so to speak, or not particularly happy in one's life, or had great kind of negative emotions towards oneself, either don't practice the Lodjong, just get instruction on something like shamatha, or practice the loving kindness meditation to others, or practice, if it's Lodjong, just the sending happiness. So all these are kind of qualifications one should make about this. And then as for social media, nobody should be going out looking for the suffering in the world through social media and giving your money to the oligarchs and all these other people. Just my personal advice. Okay, but it's very good. Thank you for raising this, because that allows us to clarify many points. Thank you.
Yes. I want a few questions.
Yeah.
First one, when I do practice Tonglen, in the beginning of practice, I'm really feel when I take suffering.
You really what, sorry?
When I do practice.
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel that in the beginning of practice,
Yes.
that with inhalation,
Yeah.
I take dark air with suffering of other sentient
Yeah.
being. But after a few minutes, this practice starts as very formal. I'm just, in my imagination, I'm just,
Yes. At that point, leave
accepting
it.
air.
At
But
that point, leave it. Relax it. When it becomes like just conceptual, and then it's a sign, let the practice rest. Just settle. Go to the settling meditation and leave behind. Don't overstrain. One should, in a way, when it becomes a strain or when it becomes artificial, you've done enough for that time. Don't worry. There's not a set amount you need to do. It's sometimes in a practice it might be 1 minute is effective. Another practice it might be 10 or 15 minutes. But go with your intuition on this. Don't persist, because otherwise you'll start to dislike the practice. It'll become just boring and routine. So, as they say, quit while you're ahead.
And can you give instruction of short meditation? Because when I start to sit and to meditate, and I think that I need to do this practice for my mom, for my friends, for people who I like, after for my enemies, after for all sentient beings. It's in my mind, I'm thinking that it's too long, and too difficult for me.
You should feel that even if there's somebody uppermost in your mind, immediately everybody is there. Don't go out trying to bring more and more people in. It's too artificial, too contrived. Yeah.
And one more question. Actually, as usual, I am not able to take this dark air with suffering for one breath. So I need few breaths in.
No, it's more like this. It's your normal breathing. It's not a yogic practice, as it should make very clear. It's not pranayama. You're not trying to do this slowly. It's just like we're sitting now. It's just like we're sitting now. It's coming in, it's going out. It's coming in, it's going out. It's not like that. So don't slow it down. And it doesn't, so it's much less technical than it sounds. It's not like a yogic instruction. Really, it's very, very important to understand that. There's a place for pranayama in the Zorim, in the completion stages, in Vajrayana, but this is not such a practice. It's just your ordinary coming in, going out, coming in, going out.
Thank you. And last question.
She's asking them on behalf of all beings. She's practicing the Bodhisattva way.
You give answer for questions that people, they're really scary that they accept suffering of others.
Yeah.
But some people, they really enjoyed that they give too much, I don't know, good things for others.
They give away too much.
Yeah, too much. My question, when we do this practice, we do only with our mind, so we just working only with our consciousness, or we really do something?
Well, no, the Bodhisattva should practice giving. It is the first perfection, and we should respond to people's needs. But, for instance, we have many responsibilities. We may have family, we may have Sangha to support, we may have our village to support. So whatever we give, we must give with intelligence So we understand I need to have something to give tomorrow. And also, I need to have food to eat tomorrow because otherwise I'll be taking from others. So I must give moderately and intelligently. Our intention is to give everything, but how we give everything must be intelligent. Because, again, it said like, if the practice of giving was actually just physically giving, then there would be no poverty in the world, because the Buddhas have perfected the practice of giving, but there's still poverty. And the answer is, for that is because it is the intention to give everything away which is most important. So we should give what we can. We should practice giving, physical giving of support and gifts and so on. But like I say, that must be done sensibly so that we're not a burden on others after we've given everything away. I give everything away today, then I have to go and ask the state to give me money tomorrow. Or the taxpayer, not the state. So,
Okay, thank you so much. For me, it's
Okay.
very important.
okay.
Thank you for your teachings, and thank you for clarifying that Tonglen is really not harmful.
Yeah.
This was a dilemma I also have
Yes.
struggled with. My
But
question,
we should still, on that, if we have fear of Tonglen, we shouldn't just beat ourselves and say, don't have fear, it's not right to have fear. If we're still hesitant emotionally, then emphasize the practice of the sending first, and then one will gradually, as it were, relax about it. So don't force yourself against your emotional feelings. It'll kick back against you. Sorry.
thank you. My question is, in a normal practice, where in the build-up phase or somewhere else could we integrate that? Let's say after taking refuge, or in the dissolving phase, or in the build-up phase, there are a lot of pauses we make. Could we integrate that into the practice?
Yes, well, for instance, one could integrate sending taking after the bodhicitta practice. After one has done the premise, refuge and bodhicitta, then one can do some sending and taking. For instance, this is in some nundros, this is how it is taught, that here's the place to do Tonglen, after the bodhicitta and before moving to Vajrasattva.
Thank
That would be
you.
one place. Okay.
Thank you so much for your teachings, Lama Jampa Thaye.
Mm-mm.
You said before that karma cannot be transferred.
Yes, but His
No.
Holiness told us this as well, of course.
You also told us I had very big ears. Now, my question is, because what I straight away had to think of was this story that is very famous.
Yeah.
I unfortunately have forgotten the name of the great bodhisattva who was teaching, and it's very often told, I think I even heard that story from you in Dagpo, that he was giving teachings and a dog was being beaten close to him, or there were stones throwing onto
Yes,
the
he's
dog.
one of the three masters of Atisha.
Exactly.
Yes.
I knew it wasn't a Tisha,
Yes,
but I knew it was
yes,
somehow
yeah.
connected. And then he fell off his throne
Yes,
because due to his bodhicitta, he took on the suffering of that
Yes.
dog.
yes.
So this story just came up in my mind. So how does that work then?
I think we have to understand that story in a kind of subtle way. First of all, he was not himself, of course, a Buddha at that time. So perhaps the emotional intensity of what he was doing caused him to react in that way to the dog's suffering. But it could not be that, in fact, the karma of the dog was transferred onto him. So I would understand in that way that it was his emotional reaction which caused this. So it's like a reaction in sympathy to the dog's suffering.
So, excuse me if but does that also mean as long as we have not realized emptiness fully,
Yeah.
or if is there still this concept of emptiness that it can happen if we take on or if we really make the wish to take on the suffering of others, that we do have physical symptoms?
No, I don't think we should worry about it. I rather regard this story as a story with a special intention, which is to say we should be willing to do this. Often in the teachings we talk about teachings that requires, it said, special intent. We need to understand what was the intention. Usually that's for sutras, passages in the sutras and tantras. But I think we can apply that method of interpretation even to a story like that when it concerns a kind of trainee bodhisattva like Maitri Yogin that the master we're talking about. No, it cannot be that the dog's karma transferred to him, even though he hadn't realized emptiness, because it doesn't transfer to us either, and we haven't realized emptiness properly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for all this. Just as a technical clarification,
Yeah.
it seems as though we're almost forgetting that we're actually visualizing ourselves as Chenrezig, correct?
We are, if we wish to, we can do this. That is, remember, usually in the Lodjong teachings, the other commentaries, that point is not made. But Rinpoche wants to bring it in here to say, because so many people practice Chenrezig, I think, that he wants to say, well, they can be brought together, these two practices.
It just seems to me that if you're visualizing yourself as Chenrezig while you're practicing Tonglen, then there's certainly no worry because you're not bringing anything personal into your habitual self. So
yes, of course, that is a very good point.
So that just seems like a safeguard.
It could be understood that way because, of course, no dirt can stick on Chenrezig. So that is another ground for fearlessness then. Yes.
Thank you.
Excuse my English. I have heard.
Excuse my French.
I have heard that to do Lodjong and to do Tonglen,
yes,
you must have taken bodhisattva vows.
Yes.
Is it true?
It is because.
So
what is the purpose
anyone
of
who
it?
doesn't have bodhisattva vows normally cannot do Lodjong and Tonglen.
When we say cannot, it's more like this. What is the purpose of it? The purpose of practicing Tonglen is to achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of others. If one is not willing to commit oneself to that, there is no purpose in the practice. So it's not like, oh, there's a rule from Mahayana headquarters. but it's a very good question for me to clarify this. That I can clarify, it's senseless. It makes no sense to practice Tonglen without having made the Bodhisattva vow. And nowadays, of course, because of the leakage of Dharma concepts and ideas into the kind of general secular world, as you can see with the mindfulness movement, there are even some people, I believe, kind of thinking they're practicing and teaching Tonglen. But unless it's in the Mahayana Buddhist context, it's not our practice.
Dear Lama,
Yeah.
One technical question again. Can we also use the guru in our heart for the transferring part?
Well, the guru in your heart, because in the Guru Yoga, the guru is descended and is in your heart, dwelling in the pavilion of light. If, for instance, one could feel that when one is taking in the negativity, that it is dissolved on contact with the guru in your heart. That the guru in your heart is, of course, your Buddha nature, which is incorruptible, cannot be made impure. So that gives you the confidence then to know whatever comes in has no negative effect. So that is why the Guru Yoga ends with the Guru coming into your heart.
Thank you.
So,
Good.
Lama Jampa Thaye, if I myself am suffering, would you recommend at this moment to practice Tonglen with others, or would it be better to first practice with my own pain and so on?
Actually, we're going on to that. That point will be dealt with very shortly in the text.
It
Where
will
you-
be done.
Yes, where you consider your own suffering and try to purify that before going on to practice the taking on the suffering of others.
Yeah.
So my general answer, however, is that one needs to feel quite healthy and quite strong, quite happy in order to enter into Lodjong practice. If one is feeling particularly weak and not confident, then Lodjong might be somewhat difficult. Although Lodjong is a cure for all problems, and even one's own suffering one can use in the Lodjong practice to take the suffering away from others. But my general advice to people is to approach this with a kind of quite happy and positive mind, or else one might, in a way, be imbalanced to start with, and then the practice will not be successful. So that's my general advice.
Much.
Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
My question is a bit for me to continue to reflect upon this practice.
Yeah.
Now I am on the stage that I think like, because I have this thing of being nervous about this practice, like taking other suffering. And while you were explaining it today, my question is it sincere from my side if I know that I will not get this suffering to say that, oh, I'm taking this suffering?
Yes, it is.
Because I don't feel it sincere then if I know that they will not come to me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Then my kind of motivation is a bit
Less.
Fake, kind of.
Well, that is a point, you see, but still the immediate sense that I'm open to everything coming from other beings does something to your heart. It kind of unlocks a knot in your heart. So it's a skillful means practice. That's all, and it works for most people. So I wouldn't worry about thinking it's fake. All our practice is fake.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is it possible to multiply ourselves during Tonglen practice like in Samantabhadra wishing prayer?
Yes, actually it is, because there is a Lodjong based upon this. There, I mentioned the other day that there's a collection of teachings called the Lodjong Jasa, the 100 Lodjongs, and there's not actually, whenever Tibetan text says 100 something, it's usually much fewer, but it's just an exaggeration. But there is one of the Lodjongs in there, is the Lodjong of Samantabhadra, and it's based upon the prayer, and the visualization for the practice includes the multiplication of one's bodies. So yes, it is.
Thank you.
Hello,
Hi.
thank you very much for the teachings. My question is, I'm doing the Nyandra, almost halfway through, and the Lodjong inspires me very much. I'm not sure how to integrate it into my daily practice because it seems like too much practice with the Nyandra and Lodjong. And second part is you said it's good to consult with a personal Lama.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I have a personal Lama who would give me like personal advice.
Who gave you the Nundra?
Lama Ole.
He's your personal Lama.
Yes.
But anyway, just to answer this briefly, as I said to somebody else earlier, it is taught in some Nundros, and therefore one could carry it across to the Kaji Mahamudra Nundra, which I presume you're doing, that you can do a little bit of the send-in taking after the Bodhisattva vow prayer. So after prostrations, we may, in the Kaji tradition, we generate Bodhicitta through the Bodhisattva vow prayer. So at that time, you can do a little bit of Tonglen, just maybe for 2 or 3 minutes or 4 or 5 minutes, something like that. It will be very nice, because it's strengthening what you've just vowed in the Bodhisattva vow. So it's not going to complicate your Nundro, it's not going to add too much to it, but you're connecting with Lodjong. That would be very nice.
And the ultimate bodhicitta?
The ultimate bodhicitta is at the end, at the Mahamudra.
Okay.
Because in Mahamudra teaching, the Mahamudra is none other than the ultimate bodhicitta. Here it's presented in a sutra style, not a tantra style, but one should consider this is the, really ultimately the same point.
Thank you.
Emptiness.
Greetings, Lama. Thank you for your precious teachings. I have a question regarding the practice. So I heard that in order to practice Tonglen, you gotta first master Shamatka or Shina. Is it true?
Well, look, even here, of course, to paraphrase Bill Clinton, it depends what master means. but and he's not one. But what I'm saying is, even here in the instruction that was given, there's a little emphasis on shamatha. The counting of 21 is said to be what is necessary to go into the main phase of the practice, because a completely wild mind, completely unstable mind, cannot do either the ultimate bodhicitta meditation or conventional bodhicitta. Shaman Rinpoche himself emphasized a lot the practicing shamatha as a necessary preliminary for Lodjong, and that's very good advice. Here it doesn't sound like it's emphasized quite so much, but it's still the point. Do the 21 countings at the beginning of every session to stabilize yourself for Lodjong. And if somebody was a complete beginner to meditation, I would say, well, probably best for you to begin with a lot more shamatha, for a while, and then approach the Lodjong. But as for mastery, that depends exactly what you mean. But at least to have a stable and settled and flexible mind, so that you don't get caught up in conceptualization or waves of emotion when you're doing the practice. So I agree with Shaman Rinpoche's point, of course. He was a great master.
And so what would be the indicator of being able to tame your mind? And
that when you sat down to practice, it's quite easy to drop the normal conceptualization that you had before you started to sit. And it's quite easy to rest there. And when you want then to go on to the focus of the meditation, for instance, in the ultimate bodhicitta, considering that all phenomena are like dreams, you can do that without it just being a lot of words. You can really be present to that kind of experience. And with the conventional bodhicitta, it's that, again, your mind is spacious enough and stable enough to really attend to feeling sentient beings are all around me. And as I'm breathing in, I'm taking their suffering, without that being over-intellectual or artificial or forced. That's why, but if either of them become artificial, then, as I said to somebody earlier, just drop them and return to a kind of basic shamatha.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Dear Lama, thank you for your teaching.
Okay.
I would like to ask you about a situation when I would like to practice for the person. About him, I'm thinking as about enemy.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that this is from my mind and my emotions, but in this about case when I have not so good relation. And I'm afraid a lot of this person, because this is my boss when I work. So
I think many of us have been there.
So and for me this is really serious
yes.
situation, because I'm feeling that he has not so good how to say thinking about me.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly, probably karma is the reason, yeah. So I would like to practice to him. Imagine as me, I am as Chenrezig, and to send him good energy, but how to imagine him, how to do it?
Well, I think what is also good to help with this, if there's a very strong enemy in one's life, is first of all to develop equanimity towards them, a balanced mind. And one good way to do that is to recall the teaching that Nagarjuna makes, which is friends of today are enemies of tomorrow. Enemies of yesterday are friends of today. There's no certainty in samsara. The situation could just slightly change. In another life, he could be this, he could be that. Use your imagination to think of how this relationship between the two of you could be very different. Or imagine also how he is maybe with his family. Maybe he's a very loving father. Maybe he's very kind. So you stop fixing on one image of him. So this is not, so you change, you get a more flexible, more wider picture of him than you have at the moment. That will then make it easier to practice the taking the sufferings from him when you could see him in this wider way. So first practice equanimity. That's what I would say to do. Okay.
Hello. Thank you for the teachings. I have a question about what Gyalo Karmapa already answered brilliantly, but I'm still working through it, about the wishes that we make every day. Is such a big part of our practice, and that they don't actually come true. I guess it's the flip side of what you explained about taking the suffering. It's actually not also happening. Yes. So if you could enlighten me and us a bit further, how do wishes actually work or not work? And I know that it was already answered perfectly well. I just am working.
Okay, from a lower level kind of answer. Actually, it is taught that there are two kinds of wishes, realizable and non-realizable, and both should be practiced. The meaning is this, that there are some wishes we might make, such as through practicing giving now, may I be wealthy in the next life. That is actually a realizable wish, a realizable aspiration, because it invokes the power of karma. And through the cause, giving, there is the result, wealth. That's realizable. So and also there may be, may there, by the practice of my giving, may there be medicine for others in a certain situation. That's still kind of realizable. Therefore, we should practice it because it creates a good attitude in our mind. It is part of the bodhisattva practice. But then there's unrealizable dedications or aspirations, such as may all sentient beings immediately be free from suffering. That cannot happen because they need to train their minds individually to do that, and has never happened up till now. So it is unrealizable. Yet still we make such aspirations, like in the King of Aspirations prayer. So they're the unrealizable type. But they're powerful practice because they shape our bodhisattva attitude. So this is really what it goes back to. How is it changing us when we make these aspirations? Even these extraordinary, ambitious beyond ambitious aspirations, the unrealizable ones, they work in changing us. And therefore, of course, indirectly they do benefit others, because the more compassion is generated in us, by us making these aspirations, the kinder we are to everybody we meet. So there is a payoff for others indirectly from our aspirations.
So does it mean that our own realization is really the most useful to others by being a good example once we are realized?
No, not just a good example. Buddhas actually show beings effectively the way they can become Buddhas themselves. We can't do that now, so we train in the Bodhisattva path, a core part of which is making aspirations. So it's not just that the Buddhas are an example, that we wish to set a good example. We wish to have the ability of the Buddhas in order that we can then really effectively work for others. Yeah. Does it then? Okay.
No more questions.
Okay. There's no end to questions. Right? So we have some time, so let's go on to the subsequent stage of instruction for relative bodhicitta. So Rinpoche says, in the post-meditation phase, i.e. between sessions, always repeat phrases such as the following. This will help one truly to apply the teachings in practice, such as the following phrase: 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 roots of virtue. So, what is this? Well, in a way, mind training is just a series of slogans, of like encouragements or exhortations. And so the thing about slogans is we should internalize them so that they become part of our continuing attitude. If we train in remembering slogans, gradually it becomes the most natural thing in the world to behave in accord with them. So Lodjong has its slogans, and here is one of them: 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 roots of virtue. And as one should memorize this and keep calling it to mind so that it is there in your mind when you meet a situation which demands it. Let Rinpoche explain more. So, 3 objects, it says. Rinpoche explains: longing, covetousness, avarice, the desire to steal, and so on. In us, the poison that are attractive to us. So this is the first object, beautiful objects. The first poison, desire. In us, that's what habitually happens. Because the imprints of desire are so strong in us, and because we lack mindfulness, we don't remember the teachings. So whenever we encounter a desirable object, it's like a stimulus for desire rising in us, because we're so habituated to it. So now we're wishing to break that chain of reaction. We're wishing to break it and somehow bring that negative emotion and turn it into the path, turn it into a root of virtue. So how would we do that? Well, we'll see. So the second object is unpleasant objects. Rinpoche says, concerning the second poison, which is hatred, this means the emotions such as anger, malice, rancor, lying, slandering, harsh speech and wrong views. They all arise in regard to objects that repel us, such as enemies and demons. And the emotion that arises, therefore, is, in short, hatred. So unpleasant objects, ugly objects in whatever way, for us, that's a stimulus usually to hatred. Again, because the imprint of hatred is so strong in us, we have no mindfulness, so immediately we encounter an ugly object, we react with disgust or hatred. And then the third poison is ignorance. So how does that? Rinpoche says, to define the mind of ignorance, or the poison of ignorance, a mind which has no harm towards or benefit towards sentient beings or objects that are neutral to us, but is, while within being indifferent, is still grasping at existence. This is ignorance. Let me explain that again in more detail. The third poison is ignorance. Now, in one way, ignorance looks like something neutral, because it arises in response to objects that don't interest us, as well as objects that fascinate us and to which we have desire, and other objects that make us feel uncomfortable, therefore we have hatred or aggression. There's a whole category of objects and people that we meet that simply do not interest us. Therefore, we're indifferent towards them. But this indifference is not equanimity. Why is it not equanimity? This is the poison of ignorance, because one is still clinging to the existence of these things. One is still assuming these things are real and out there, separate objects. Just as one desires objects one thinks are real and separate and out there, and hates objects one feels are separate and out there, so one is indifferent to objects one feels are real, separate and out there. So those are the three objects. Beautiful ones, poison is desire. Ugly ones, the poison is hatred. Uninteresting ones, neutral ones, the poison is ignorance. That's in a way describing our experience from day to day. Just the set of encounters with these three categories of objects and us reacting in this way with desire, hatred or ignorance. So how to break that chain, and more importantly, how to get back to bodhicitta, because this habitual reaction will kill any bodhicitta we may be generating in the session of meditation. If we do the session of meditation, we meditate, send and take into others, and then immediately we leave the cushion, we're back to the same old set of reactions. There's ugly, I hate it. There's beautiful, I must have it. There's no space for bodhicitta to survive in our heart. So what to do? Turn them into roots of virtue. Rinpoche says, recognize these three emotions to be like three poisonous substances, roots that produce suffering for oneself and others, and eliminate them as far as possible by using this method that's embodied in the phrase. 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 roots of virtue. And he says, Jamgon Kongtrul explains this in some detail in his commentary on the Lodjong, The Direct Path to Enlightenment. So, the principle is this. When desire arises in our mind, because we've just encountered a beautiful object, one should think, may all the defilement of desire that other beings are experiencing now, may it all come into my desire. May my desire, as it were, be like a magnet that draws the defilement of desire, the disturbing emotion of desire, from all these others. May they therefore be free from desire. They have the virtue of being free from desire. And now that they're losing their desire, may they be always free from desire until they achieve Buddhahood. So, in other words, it's a version of the taking practice. In this case, one is taking the desire, the disturbing emotion desire, which produces suffering for others, even though they don't realize it immediately. We take it onto ourselves. But particularly, we use our own poison that's arising, our own poisonous emotion, as the way to draw it. It's like, I have desire, so I'll use that to take all the desire away from others into my own, without fear of the consequence. Because one might say, but in that case, that just means I'll have mega desire. I've trouble bad enough now with my desires. Now you're asking me to have everybody's desire into mine. Isn't that a recipe for trouble? Actually, no, it is not, as we'll see. The same practice when we encounter an ugly object. As Rinpoche says, do the same when hatred arises. Think, may all the defilements of hatred of every sentient being be gathered into my hatred. May they all gain the root of virtue of being free from hate. Now that their defilements are overcome, their defilement of hatred is overcome through my practice of taking it, may they remain free from hatred until they achieve Buddhahood. And in the same, when ignorance, when one feels just indifferent to objects, bored and indifferent with objects, one should have the same type of aspiration. May all the defilements of ignorance that other beings are having, may they be gathered into mine. May they have the freedom, the virtue of freedom from ignorance. And now that their defilement of ignorance is overcome, may they be free from ignorance until Buddhahood. So, now Rinpoche says, to explain this properly, fully. When one thinks this thing in response to one of the objects arising and one of the poisons arising in response to that object in oneself, when one just remembers these words or even recites them out loud to oneself, the afflictions of the three poisons will be transformed by the path of sending and taking into three vast roots of virtue. What he means is this. What has happened at the end of this sequence? You went from a poison, a negative emotion, which would create great suffering, because desire proliferates, it causes one to be unhappy and frustrated and neurotic. But one has turned it around. It's like one's flipped it over. And it ends by being a wonderful, compassionate emotion that I'm taking all the suffering others are having through their desire, I take away. I wish to take it away from them. Your mind at the end of that sequence is a wholly positive, wholly virtuous mind. There's no self-clinging at that moment. The selfishness and the tightness of desire has utterly been burst apart, like popped. And now you have in your heart instead just concern for others, just kindness and concern, compassion for others. And you've not, so what was a poison to begin with becomes a virtue. What was a negative thing, a cause of suffering, becomes a positive thing. Your very emotion of desire. As I say, you've used the energy of your desire to bring in the suffering from desire of all beings. It's like an alchemy. A poison is transformed into a medicine. The same goes for other defilements beyond just desire, hatred, and ignorance, such as the defilements of pride or jealousy or avarice. If they're redirected in this way, at the very moment they arise, because that's the key thing, why we should train in the slogan is so we're ready when an object, a beautiful object arises and we see the poison of desire rise in our mind, we apply the remedy. I make it a root of virtue. Because I remember to do so because I've been training in the phrase, training in the slogan. This is excellent when one redirects the poison in this way. It's like transforming a heap of rotting food or transforming excrement and urine into manure, which when you spread it over a field will produce a good harvest. In other words, my disturbing emotions are a manure out of which the crop of compassion and wisdom will be produced. It's said that the Bodhisattva has that skillful means to transform the disturbing emotions into the causes of enlightenment. So that is the meaning of this phrase, 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 roots of virtue. So one should memorize it and be ready to train with it whenever the opportunity, the need arises. And then Rinpoche inserts here kind of a little teaching from Guru Pamasambhava about how to meet emotions when they arise, disturbing emotions when they arise. But this instruction is in a way more like applying the view of Mahamudra or Dzogchen rather than this technique of transformation that has just been explained to us. Rinpoche quotes Pamasambhava. Guru Rinpoche said, whatever thoughts based on the 5 poisons arise, which are the flickering motion of mental objects, meet them first. Do not engage in contrived mental analysis afterwards. Thought's activity left in its natural state is liberated into the Dhammakaya. This is very much the Mahamudra or Dzogchen approach, that actually even the disturbing emotions arising as they do in response to objects, they're primordially nothing other than empty. They have no core, no solidity. They are actually just like the waves of the sea are no more than the ocean, and therefore the ocean, when you see them from that point of view, as they rise and pass away by themselves, they do not cause any disturbance to the ocean. So thoughts do not disturb the natural purity of mind, which is the Dhammakaya. So if you have that confidence in the view of Dzogchen and Mahamudra, whatever thoughts arise for you, they naturally liberate themselves. So Rinpoche says, in that case, if one can apply this view without accepting or rejecting, like grasping at thoughts or trying to suppress them, don't suppress, don't grasp, just leave things as they are in their natural state. This method to transform mental activity into primordial wisdom is an essential key point. So Rinpoche doesn't further explain this here, but as I say, it is like if we have confidence, experiential confidence in Mahamudra or Dzogchen, then this is how we would respond to thoughts, poisonous thoughts when they arise. So we have some more to do to complete this instruction for the subsequent stage of relative bodhicitta, but we will have to leave it till Thursday. So let's conclude now with the dedication of merit. Sonam de tamshi zikpa ne tobe ne pe ranam pamchi ne chigana chi bala trupaye sipi sole drowa sho. Okay.
Dear friends, we have one very joyful announcement about a movie premiere. I don't know if you have heard, but on the 9th at 8 p.m. We will have a movie premiere about Shama Rinpoche, a movie directed and made by Topka Korlo. So the premiere will take place in front of the Gompa. Everybody are welcome to join. And please spread the word among our other friends. And we cannot wait to see you here at 8 p.m. on the 9th in 2 days. Thank you.